Hello everybody, I'm Alexey Krabrov, the organizer of SF Scala, and here we are on location at Rep Media, where we have a meetup themed around Akka. We have excellent Akka talks, and the first talk is by Tristan, a web services consultant. Welcome, Tristan.
Thank you.
So I've seen that we are basically talking about building distributed hash table in Scala using Akka, and we have really huge meetup tonight. So people are responding to this. Right? Why do you think we have so many folks lining up to learn about this?
It's a really good question. I think it's because we are able to combine a couple of really interesting topics when we look at implementing something like a distributed hash table.
Mm-hmm.
There's the good old-fashioned computer science, there's Scala, functional programming, and Akka. And when you throw them all together, you get an opportunity to work on a problem that you don't really get to see in your day-to-day work. You know, it's not just a CRUD application, it's not even a graphics engine. You're actually starting to think about how a ever-changing system, or ever-changing network of nodes can work together to store a massive data structure. And I think that's a fascinating problem.
And what makes Akka a good choice for the distributed system you described?
I think it's a good choice because it's very message-oriented. And so when you take a protocol like Chord, which is the one that I'm talking about tonight in my talk, it's described in terms of messages that are sent between nodes in the system. And using a programming language and framework that works with that rather than against it makes it much easier to reason about what's happening in the system. And it provides guarantees in terms of your system design that you don't get when you're using, say, BSD sockets in a C++ environment.
Interesting. And how did you come to kind of learn and use Akka? What was your Scala learning trajectory?
Well, I started tinkering with Scala. I'd say tinkering probably around May last year. I finished up in a permanent role working on a messaging gateway and decided I need to learn something new. So I started looking at Scala. I picked up the reactive programming course on Coursera. It's a bit of a deep dive. And that's what really inspired me to do it. After finishing a key value store assignment as part of that course, I thought, okay, time to take Chord, which is something that I'd learned about while I was at university, and see how it applies in this new world.
Cool. And what were your experiences, kind of what were your highlights? How would you characterize this, usage of Scala to build this? How would you summarize this experience to somebody else who may think about learning Scala?
That is a good question because it hasn't always been easy. When I first started looking at Scala, I found it quite confusing. I came from C++ and Java at that point. And especially once I started looking at Akka as well, just getting used to the semantics around messaging did take a little while. But once I learnt them, they started to feel like second nature, not just in a learning to tolerate it sort of way, but really learning to wield it as a very powerful tool.
Interesting. So, as I understand, you are a kind of full stack web services consultant. So this is a full stack development is the theme of this year at SF Scala. So what would be your tools of choice when you build full-blown web app using Scala? And what are your recommendations for folks who are basically getting into this? Like, how should somebody try this out, building a full stack web app?
Well, my recommendation when approaching any project like that is try to go with what's most popular, because especially when you're learning a new technology, you're going to have probably hundreds of questions by the time you build a real competency in it. And using something that other people have already used and already experimented with just eases some of that initial pain that you'll go through while learning.
So if you want, like if somebody asks specifically, okay, I'm going to use Scala on the back end, what would you suggest they use on the front end? And which kind of way to build an API say they should do in Scala? If we just somebody asks you for specific advice.
Well, on the back end, I would definitely say choose something like Play. You don't want to be too creative there, and there's a lot of community support around it. On the front end, I find that harder to make a call with because there are literally hundreds of JavaScript libraries. Personally, I'd love to start looking at things like Scala.js myself, but haven't had the opportunity to. So I guess Angular wouldn't be a bad choice, but I definitely have to bite my tongue a little bit on jumping to any conclusions there.
Okay, yeah, I mean, not a bad choice. I think it's a good choice for the JavaScript land we have. So Angular comes up, so that's kind of a good confirmation. And I'll wrap with kind of a question about Australian developer community. We don't often get folks here from Australia, and kind of we had folks from NICTA in Sydney a while ago, and I know like things change in Australia, and lots of NICTA folk kind of spread around. So how do you characterize kind of Melbourne Scala community? What trends do you see? What is the industry adoption in terms of jobs? If you can kind of tell us a little bit about the Scala scene, can you leave it?
Okay, so the way I found the Scala scene in Melbourne is that it's still getting off the ground. There's definitely this core contingency of programmers who are really interested in doing their jobs better, and that's what's inspiring them to look at technologies like Scala. But we haven't quite got the momentum behind it for larger companies to say, we are going to build all of our tech in Scala. It's usually one or two smaller teams which have already built up the trust of, say, the CTO or a program manager who are allowed to experiment with it. And even then, it's usually in a microservices environment where the risk is considered quite low. So we've got a long way to go, but we do have a gradually strengthening meetup group there. Routinely get 30 plus people there, which is nice to see. And with bigger companies like REA, which is Real Estate Australia, starting to use Scala, I think it's going to become probably as big as Ruby eventually.
All right. Here's to it. So let's see how the scene develops, and I hope we can make a connection. Have our folks, go back and forth, and we're looking forward to the talk.
Thank you.
Thanks.